This is really bad.
Okay, this is bad. So what do you want to do? Well, good, it's bad. Good. You think
Why?
I don't need to be comforted? You think
Did
I'm
you say anything?
You think I'm okay? You think everything is okay with me? Why does everybody think it's okay for me to sit here and take all this abuse and not say anything, and I'm not supposed to feel anything? I'm not supposed to care.
You are overreacting. You are overreacting.
Jenny never imagined that one fight with Sumit could end two of the biggest parts of her life at the same time. But after an explosive confrontation spiraled from a private marriage argument into a full production crisis, TLC made a decision she never saw coming. What began with Jenny demanding one simple answer from her husband ended with cameras being stopped, producers stepping between them, and Jenny being told that her future with the franchise was effectively over. The most disturbing part was not even TLC's decision, because when Jenny turned towards Sumit expecting him to defend her, he hesitated. And that hesitation made her wonder whether losing the show was only the beginning. The tension had been building long before the argument exploded. Jenny could feel that something about Sumit had changed, even though he repeatedly told her that everything was fine. He was quieter around her, he seemed distracted during conversations, and whenever Jenny asked what was bothering him, his answer was always some version of the same thing. He was tired, he had things on his mind, and she was reading too much into normal behavior. Jenny did not believe that explanation. After everything they had survived together, she had learned to notice when Sumit was keeping something inside. Their relationship had already survived secrecy, family opposition, enormous cultural pressure, and years of uncertainty, so Jenny knew exactly what Sumit looked like when he was afraid to tell her something. This time, however, she felt something different because he was not simply nervous. He appeared to be preparing himself for a conversation he did not want to have. That feeling stayed with Jenny until she finally confronted him. She asked why he had suddenly been spending more time talking privately with members of his family. Sumit initially tried to brush it aside and said there was nothing unusual about speaking with his relatives, but Jenny immediately pushed back. She reminded him that conversations with his family had caused some of the most painful moments of their entire relationship, and if those conversations involved her marriage, then she believed she had a right to know. Sumit's expression changed, and Jenny noticed it instantly. He told her that every conversation he had with his family could not automatically become an investigation. Jenny answered that she would not need to investigate anything if he simply told her the truth the first time. Sumit became defensive, and what should have been a basic conversation suddenly became another argument about trust. This was where the real problem began, because neither Jenny nor Sumit was actually fighting about one private phone call anymore. Jenny was fighting against years of fear that Sumit might eventually decide that being married to her had cost him too much. Sumit was fighting against years of feeling that every decision he made had to prove his loyalty to Jenny. Those two frustrations had been sitting underneath their relationship for a long time, and now one small disagreement had given both of them permission to bring everything back to the surface. Jenny reminded Sumit that she had changed her entire life for him. She had left America, moved thousands of miles away from the people and places she knew, fought through endless uncertainty, and stayed beside him when almost everyone around them believed their relationship would eventually fail. From Jenny's perspective, she was not asking Sumit for something unreasonable. She was asking for the transparency she believed she had earned. Sumit heard the same words very differently. He told Jenny that he understood everything she had sacrificed, but he could not spend the rest of their marriage being reminded of those sacrifices every time they disagreed. Jenny immediately asked whether he believed she was using her past against him, and Sumit said he believed there were times when she treated those sacrifices like a debt he would never finish paying. That comment completely changed Jenny's expression. For years, Jenny had viewed everything she endured as evidence of how deeply she loved Sumit. Hearing him describe that same history as something that created pressure between them felt almost like having the meaning of their relationship rewritten in front of her. She asked him whether he regretted marrying her. Sumit said no, but he did not answer quickly enough. Jenny noticed the pause, and once she saw it, there was almost no way to make her forget it. She asked again whether he regretted their marriage, and Sumit became frustrated because he believed she was trying to force him into giving a simple answer to something much more complicated. He told her that loving someone and being exhausted by parts of a relationship could exist at the same time. Jenny immediately responded that people usually started talking like that when they were preparing to leave. Then Sumit revealed the detail that turned the argument into something much bigger. He admitted that he had been discussing his future with members of his family. Jenny froze. She asked what exactly he meant by his future, because there was one word missing from that sentence that mattered more than anything else. Sumit had said his future instead of their future, and Jenny wanted to know why. Sumit tried to explain that he had only been talking about possibilities, responsibilities, work, family, and what his life might look like over the next few years. Jenny was not interested in vague explanations anymore. She asked whether those conversations included the possibility of a life without her. Sumit hesitated again. That was the moment Jenny's anger turned into fear. She asked how long his family had been talking to him about their marriage, and Sumit told her that this was exactly why he had avoided the conversation. He said Jenny immediately assumed that every serious discussion meant someone was plotting against her. Jenny answered that she had spent years watching Sumit's relatives question their relationship, so pretending that her suspicion came from nowhere was unfair. Sumit agreed that the past had been painful, but he said the current conversation was different. He insisted that nobody had ordered him to leave Jenny, and nobody was secretly arranging another relationship for him. He was simply trying to figure out what he wanted his life to become. Jenny asked why figuring out his future required conversations that excluded his wife. That question landed harder than Sumit expected. He explained that sometimes he needed to speak freely without worrying that every sentence would immediately become another emotional confrontation. Jenny heard that as confirmation that he no longer felt comfortable talking to her. Now the argument accelerated. Jenny accused Sumit of privately building an escape route while publicly telling her everything was fine. Sumit rejected that accusation and said thinking about his future was not the same as planning to abandon his marriage. Jenny asked whether he understood how humiliating it felt to discover that other people might know more about her husband's doubts than she did. Sumit told her she was turning uncertainty into betrayal. Jenny told him betrayal often started with secrets. At first, production allowed the conversation to continue because tense relationship discussions were exactly what the cameras were there to document. Nobody expected the disagreement to become anything more than another emotional scene between two people whose relationship had always been complicated. Then Jenny looked away from Sumit and toward the crew. Her entire focus shifted. She asked whether the producers already knew about Sumit's conversations with his family. There was a brief hesitation before anyone answered, and to Jenny that hesitation felt like another betrayal. She demanded to know whether Sumit had talked about the situation during private interviews. A producer attempted to explain that individual cast conversations were part of filming, and that they could not disclose everything one person had said before scenes played out naturally. Jenny became furious. From her perspective, she had just learned that Sumit had been privately discussing doubts about their future, while people around her continued filming as though nothing was happening. She began to believe that everyone else knew she was walking toward an emotional ambush except her. Sumit immediately told Jenny that production had not created the problem. That was the wrong thing to say. Jenny turned toward him and asked why he was defending the crew when his wife was clearly devastated. Sumit tried to explain that he was not choosing anyone's side and only wanted Jenny to understand that he had made his own decisions. Jenny interrupted him and said that if the producers knew he was questioning their future and intentionally waited for the subject to explode on camera, then she had been turned into entertainment without knowing the entire situation. A producer calmly reminded Jenny that filming could stop temporarily if she needed time. Jenny said she wanted the cameras off immediately. The room changed. Until that point, everyone had been watching a relationship argument. Now production had to manage a cast member who felt personally betrayed by the filming process itself. Jenny removed her microphone and said she was done. Sumit followed her and asked her not to leave while they were both angry, but Jenny told him the conversation was finished because she no longer knew whether she was speaking to her husband or performing inside a situation everybody else understood better than she did. Production attempted to calm things down, but Jenny was no longer interested in calming down. She demanded that the entire confrontation be deleted. A producer explained that she could not personally decide what recorded material would or would not be used. That answer pushed Jenny further. She said she had spent years giving the show deeply personal parts of her life, and she refused to accept that there was no point where she could say something had gone too far. Production explained that boundaries could absolutely be discussed, but destroying footage because someone disliked how a conversation unfolded was a completely different issue. Jenny argued that this was not about disliking a scene. She believed she had been blindsided. Sumit again said nobody had forced him to say anything. Jenny snapped back that his constant defense of everyone except her was proving her point. For several minutes, the confrontation became impossible to control. Jenny wanted filming stopped permanently until she received guarantees about the footage. Production wanted everybody separated long enough to understand what had happened. Sumit wanted Jenny to stop treating his private uncertainty as evidence of a conspiracy. Nobody was listening to anyone else. Eventually, a senior production figure stepped into the situation and told Jenny that filming was being suspended for the day. Jenny initially believed that meant she had won the argument. It did not. She was told that production needed to review what had happened before deciding whether cameras could resume under normal conditions. Jenny asked why she was being treated like the problem when the entire confrontation had started because Sumit hid important conversations from her. The response was straightforward. TLC was not evaluating the health of their marriage. Production was evaluating what had happened during filming. That distinction made Jenny even angrier. She said there was no way to separate her emotional reaction from what Sumit had done. Production answered that nobody was asking her not to be emotional, but there still had to be boundaries when conflict expanded beyond the relationship and began affecting the filming environment. Jenny left believing she was being punished for reacting honestly. Sumit stayed behind for several minutes. That detail mattered because when Jenny learned he had not immediately followed her, she interpreted it as another sign that something inside their marriage had shifted. By the time they spoke again, the argument had become much quieter. But quieter did not mean better. Jenny asked Sumit whether he understood how serious the situation had become. Sumit said he did. Then Jenny asked whether he was sorry. Instead of immediately apologizing, Sumit asked what exactly she wanted him to apologize for. Jenny could hardly believe the question. She said she wanted him to apologize for hiding his doubts, discussing their future with other people, allowing her to discover everything while cameras were present, and then defending production while she felt completely humiliated. Sumit said he was sorry she had been hurt, but he refused to apologize for needing someone to talk to. Jenny told him that was not enough. Sumit responded that nothing had been enough for a long time. That sentence created another silence. This time, neither of them raised their voice. Sumit explained that he felt like every disagreement eventually became a test of whether he loved Jenny enough. If he disagreed with her, he was choosing someone else. If he needed space, he was preparing to leave. If he spoke to his family, he was betraying her. If he admitted he was unhappy about something, she treated it like evidence that their entire relationship was collapsing. Jenny said he was ignoring the reason she had become so sensitive to those things. She reminded him that insecurity did not appear from nowhere. Their relationship had been built through years of situations where she genuinely did not know whether Sumit would choose her. She had repeatedly watched outside pressure threaten the future they were trying to build, so asking her to suddenly stop fearing abandonment was unrealistic. Sumit understood that. But he also believed their past had become a prison. He told Jenny that they could not keep reliving the same fears forever. Jenny asked whether he wanted freedom from the past or freedom from her. Sumit did not answer. Again, his silence said more than either of them wanted. The next morning, production had still not resumed. Jenny started realizing that the situation might be more serious than she originally believed. She expected someone to call and explain the schedule, but instead she received a request for a formal conversation. That was when her anger started turning into anxiety. She knew reality television survived on conflict, which made her wonder what could have happened behind the scenes for production to treat this particular argument differently. Jenny went into the conversation expecting warnings, new boundaries, or perhaps a short filming break. What she heard was much more serious. She was told that the confrontation had been reviewed, and there were significant concerns about continuing production under the same arrangement. Jenny immediately argued that couples on reality television fought constantly, and she could not understand how one emotional day could outweigh years of filming. The answer she received was that the issue was not simply the argument with Sumit. It was everything that happened afterward. The repeated demands involving recorded material, the conflict with crew members, the refusal to continue under existing production terms, and the breakdown of trust between Jenny and the people responsible for filming had changed the situation. Then came the fictional decision she never expected. TLC was ending plans to continue working with Jenny. At first, Jenny thought she had misunderstood. She asked whether they meant filming was paused. They said no. She asked whether they meant she would miss one appearance. Again, the answer was no. She was being told that under this fictional scenario, the network did not intend to include her in future franchise filming. Jenny was stunned. For years, so much of her life had unfolded in front of cameras that being told the relationship with TLC could end in a single conversation felt almost impossible to process. She asked whether Sumit would still be allowed to appear. Nobody gave her the simple answer she wanted. That uncertainty immediately reopened the wound. If Sumit could continue while she was removed, Jenny believed the story would continue without her even though she had helped build it. When she finally saw Sumit, she expected him to be furious. Instead, he looked concerned but controlled. Jenny told him TLC had effectively banned her from returning, and she waited for him to react. Sumit said he was sorry. Jenny stared at him. She asked whether that was all he had to say. Sumit told her he did not know what she expected him to do at that moment. Jenny said she expected her husband to tell TLC they could not remove her and continue pretending everything was normal. Sumit said the situation was not that simple. Those 6 words became more painful than the network decision itself. Jenny asked him what exactly was complicated about supporting his wife. Sumit said supporting her did not mean agreeing with everything she had done. Jenny immediately accused him of taking TLC's side. Sumit said there were no sides. Jenny laughed because, to her, there were clearly sides, and she had just discovered that her husband might not be standing on hers. Then Sumit asked the question that changed the entire emotional direction of the story. He asked Jenny whether she understood why things had reached this point. Jenny could not believe he was asking her to examine her own behavior immediately after she had been removed from the show. Sumit explained that he was not blaming her for everything. He was asking whether she could see that their arguments had become increasingly impossible to resolve because every disagreement turned into a crisis. Jenny told him this crisis started because he hid something. Sumit agreed that he should have handled his private conversations differently. But he said Jenny's reaction had become much bigger than the secret itself. Jenny asked whether he genuinely believed she was the real problem. Sumit said he believed they both had problems they were refusing to face. That answer hurt because Jenny had spent years viewing them as a team fighting against everyone else. Now Sumit was telling her the greatest threat might be coming from inside the relationship. Jenny asked whether he still wanted to be married. Sumit answered that he still loved her. Jenny immediately pointed out that she had not asked whether he loved her. She asked whether he wanted the marriage. That distinction forced Sumit into the exact conversation he had been avoiding. He admitted that he did not want to make promises while emotions were high. He needed time to understand whether they could actually change the parts of their marriage that kept bringing them back to the same argument. Jenny said needing time was simply a softer way of saying he was unsure about her. Sumit said pretending to be certain would be dishonest. Jenny looked completely defeated. Losing TLC had suddenly become secondary because the one thing she had feared from the beginning was now sitting directly in front of her. Sumit was unsure. Jenny told him that uncertainty felt cruel after everything she had done to keep their relationship alive. Sumit told her that staying in a marriage because of old sacrifices would be cruel too. Neither person had an easy answer to that. Jenny began questioning whether she had spent so much time proving everyone wrong that she had stopped asking whether she herself was still happy. That was a painful realization, because leaving would not simply mean ending a relationship. It would mean looking back at years of battles, moves, tears, family conflicts, and public criticism, and accepting that love had not guaranteed permanence. Sumit was confronting a different fear. For years he had fought for the right to choose Jenny, but now he had to ask whether continuing to choose the marriage because he once fought for it was the same thing as actively wanting the life they had today. That is where their story became much more complicated than a simple villain versus victim fight. Jenny was not wrong for wanting loyalty after years of instability. Sumit was not wrong for wanting space to admit uncertainty. The problem was that Jenny interpreted uncertainty as abandonment, while Sumit interpreted Jenny's need for reassurance as control. Those two reactions kept feeding each other. The more distant Sumit became, the more Jenny demanded reassurance. The more Jenny demanded reassurance, the more trapped Sumit felt. The more trapped Sumit felt, the more he withdrew. Then Jenny saw that withdrawal and became even more afraid. By the time either of them recognized the pattern, TLC's fictional decision had already forced the issue into the open. Jenny eventually told Sumit she was considering going back to America for a while. Sumit immediately asked whether she was leaving permanently. Jenny said she did not know. For once, she wanted to make a decision without knowing exactly how Sumit would react. She explained that she had spent years organizing her future around their relationship, and maybe some distance would finally tell her whether she was staying because she still wanted this marriage, or because she was terrified of admitting that the dream had changed. Sumit looked shaken by the possibility. He told Jenny that he never wanted her to feel unwanted. Jenny answered that his intentions no longer mattered as much as the way his hesitation made her feel. She said losing television opportunities was painful, but television could never hurt her the way hearing uncertainty from Sumit had. Sumit told her he still loved her deeply. Jenny believed him. That was what made the situation harder. There was no dramatic revelation that all of their feelings had disappeared. There was no simple confession that one person had secretly stopped caring. They still loved each other, but they had reached a point where love and compatibility were no longer automatically the same thing. Jenny asked him one final question. If there were no cameras, no TLC, no producers, no family pressure, no audience, and nobody watching what happened next, would he still choose her? Sumit looked at her for several seconds. He said he wanted to believe he would. Jenny's eyes changed immediately, because she understood the difference between I would and I want to believe I would. She told Sumit that after everything they had survived, she could not keep building her future around maybe. Sumit said he did not want to lie just to stop her from leaving. Jenny told him that might have been the first completely honest thing either of them had said during the entire crisis. She began preparing for the possibility of returning to America temporarily, while Sumit faced the reality that the space he had been asking for could become much larger than he ever intended. The fight that began with one hidden conversation had now changed everything. Jenny's fictional future with TLC was over, her marriage was hanging in uncertainty, and Sumit was finally being forced to answer a question he had avoided for too long. Did he still want the life he once fought so hard to have, or had years of pressure changed what he wanted? Jenny faced an equally painful question, because after spending so much time proving that their relationship could survive everyone else, she now had to decide whether surviving was still enough. And if Jenny really did leave India, TLC's fictional ban would no longer be the biggest ending created by that explosive fight. Because the marriage viewers thought had already survived the impossible could finally be facing the one thing neither Jenny nor Sumit knew how to defeat. The possibility that two people could still love each other and still decide that love was no longer enough. This story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.